There's a place He comes to me. Though I'm blind, He helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see Him face to face.
This is Kurt Kaikkonen, pastor of Calvary Chapel, Waterford, at your neighborhood church. Today on Face to Face, we'll be in the book of Exodus. So grab your Bibles and let's get started. If you want to hear this complete message in its entirety, go to yourneighborhoodchurch.com, where you can download Your Neighborhood Church app at the App Store. And so God tells Moses that he's not going to be able to see his face and live, but that he will allow him to see all his goodness pass before him, and that he will proclaim his name before Moses. And so God, he takes Moses and he puts him in the cleft of a rock, which means a cave. And then God, he puts his hand over that cave. And then God, he passes by with all his glory. And after he's passed by, he removes his hand, and Moses was able to see God's glory after he passed. And when it says here that Moses saw God's back, it's not talking about God's anatomy. It means that Moses could only see what was behind God. And this could just as accurately be stated, Moses saw the after effects of God's radiant glory, which would be his afterglow, which had just passed by. And that was as much as Moses could bear. And Moses here, he was satisfied. All right, and now we get to chapter 34. And so after this experience of the cleft of the rock, God calls Moses back up the mountain again. And now Moses is to make 2 copies of the 2 stone tablets that God reminds him here that he broke. And God said that he would write on these new tablets. And then Moses is to come up on the very next morning. So Moses, he spends the rest of the day making these stone tablets. And then early on the next morning, Moses goes back up the mountain. And so this is really exciting, because by God ordering Moses to make these 2 stone tablets, that means that God here is going to renew the covenant by replacing the tablets that he broke. And so this is the second giving of the 10 commandments. And the rules are the same, that no one's allowed to be in the vicinity of the mountain. So now Moses, he goes up the mountain, and as he goes up, the Lord descends down on the mountain in his cloud until they meet. And then the Lord passed before Moses, and he proclaims his name to him. And by God proclaiming his name, it doesn't mean that the Lord just told Moses his name, because Moses, he already knew God's name. He knew his name was Yahweh. But what this means is that God's going to reveal his character by words. And then he starts with the Lord God, which the Lord is the name of Yahweh. And it's the same name that was known by Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But here, God repeats the name twice, which is believed to speak of God's unchangeableness. And then God says, merciful, which is better translated as full of compassion, because that same word here, merciful, is translated 5 times out of the 13 times it's used as full of compassion. And then God uses the word gracious, which comes from this idea to bend down and to stoop to show kindness to someone who is inferior to you, which means God is showing favor to all those who don't deserve it. And then God goes and he describes his character with the word long-suffering, which means patience, which means God, he's going to be slow to anger. That God, he doesn't have a short fuse, and he doesn't get angry quickly. And then God says, abounding in goodness and truth. And abounding means he has plenty of it, that he has a lot of it already stored up, and that it's full and it's overflowing. And then with all this mercy that God has, that he says that he has it for thousands. And then he tells us that in his character, that he is a forgiving God. And then he gives us 3 different types of things that he forgives. And so that no one would ever be able to come to him and say that they were unforgivable. Because God, he starts here with the forgiving of iniquity. And iniquity, well, what that is a character sin. That means that we're all perverted in our character and that we've acted out of our perversiveness. That's like having a sin nature. It means that we're twisted and that our character's been perverted and we've acted out of this character or out of our twistedness. And here God is saying that he is willing to forgive us even when we've acted out of our perverted character. So this here tells us that there's no one who's unforgivable. And so this is all types of perverted and twisted people, all those different kind of things. And then it says that he can forgive our transgressions. And what a transgression is when you know something's wrong and you know exactly what the law says about it, where the law says it's wrong, and then you purposely go and break it anyways. It's those sins where you have absolutely no excuse because you knew exactly what you did. And then it says sin, and it says that he would forgive sin. And in sin, all that means is that you just missed the mark. So a sin could be an accident, but even if it was an accident, it's still wrong. And so God is saying that he will forgive all those wrongs that we commit, even if they're unintentional. And so God is saying here that his character is willing to forgive all 3 of these. And he wants us to know here that even though he's willing to forgive us, that if someone does not receive God's mercy or forgiveness, that they will be punished. That just because he forgives sins, that doesn't mean that he's going to be clearing the guilty. And then here where it says to the 3rd and 4th generation, it's not talking about some kind of generational sin, that there's some kind of family sin that you're going to have to pay for, because the Bible, it doesn't know of any type of sin like that. In the Bible, everybody is only accountable for their own sins. And so that thing about the 3rd, 4th generation, that phrase is a Semitic idiom, which means it's just a saying. And by saying 3rd and 4th generations, it's saying that this is going to continue. And then after God reveals all this about himself, Moses, he bows his head and he worships. And by God revealing his great character of mercy and forgiveness, and that he even forgives people with the perverted acts of their own nature, Moses is going to go and try this out. And he's going to put God's forgiveness to the test here. And so he's going to see if he's really willing to forgive Israel and how they acted, because they acted in iniquity and they acted with transgressions and they sinned regarding what they did with that molded calf. And so Moses, he asked God to forgive his people. He asked him to forgive God's people. And Moses doesn't just say to go forgive them, but Moses, he includes himself with the people. And he asked God to forgive our iniquity and our sin. And then Moses, he goes and asks God again to go with them, to go among us, to take us as your inheritance. And admitting that, yes, we are a stiff-necked people. And then God, again, he just basically says, okay. And it all starts all over again. And they start making the covenant all over again. And when you read this, you don't get the sense that God is doing this grudgingly, but that he is actually truly excited again. And so God, he starts going on and he starts to talk about the great things he's going to do for them. And he says things like marvels that nations have never seen before. And then God tells Moses, it's going to be awesome. It's awesome, the things that I'm going to do with you. And God tells them how he's going to drive out their enemies in the land that they're going, all those pagan tribes. But then God warns them about the people that he's driving out so that they don't make covenants with them, because he knows that these pagans will be a snare to them, because Israel is prone to idolatry. And God knows that the only way to keep them from their idolatry is for Israel to destroy those idols and those altars right away, because of Israel's own nature. Many of us know that we can't give place to the things in our past, those things that drew us away from God. We can't give any place to our idols, or else we'll end up returning to them and practicing them again. Where we can't make any covenant with them, and that we have to destroy them, which means for some of us, there are places that we can't go anymore, or there are things that we can't look at anymore, and there are people that we can't hang out with any longer, because they'll draw us in, and they'll draw us in right away. Because if we sit down and we partake of them again, it's all over for us. And that's exactly what God is saying to Israel here, that they can't even sit down with them for a meal, or else they're going to end up playing the harlot with their gods. And then they're going to see their daughters become their wives, and they're going to take their daughters to be their sons' wives. And then they're going to be all corrupted with their gods, just like the pagan people are corrupted with their gods. And God, he won't stand for it. He won't tolerate it. He says he's a jealous God, and he didn't call them to serve idols because they had just tried to do that just a month ago. But Israel here, they are no stronger than any of the other people in the land. So they're just people, and they're prone to the same sensual sins of idolatry that all the other people are prone to. And so God, then he reaffirms the second of the 10 commandments that the nation just broke. He says, you shall make no molded gods for yourselves. And then God, he goes through, and then he goes and he repeats some of the laws he had given in that book of the covenant that the people had previously all agreed to. And it's about the keeping of the feast, especially that feast of unleavened bread, which begins with the Passover, and then the redeeming of the firstborn males and their livestock. And then he goes through the laws of the Sabbath. And then he goes through those other two feasts that they were to appear before God, the Feast of First Fruits and the Feast of Ingathering, and how they're not to mix leaven with their offerings. And then he even mentions again that not boiling a young goat in its mother's milk, which was that pagan fertility ritual practiced by the Canaanites. And so there's a lot of things that are repeated and God mentions here again. But there's also a lot of things that God had left out. But this is like they're all starting all over again. And so Moses, he's commanded to write this all down in a book again, like the first time he did it, where they all swore to obey it. And so now they're not only getting a new book, but they're getting a new copy of the 10 Commandments. And so by God renewing this covenant, it shows that God has forgiven the people, and they now again have this new beginning. Okay, and then at the end, we're told that Moses has been sustained miraculously for these 40 days on the mountain without any bread, without any water. And this reminds us of Jesus when Jesus was tempted by the devil, where he had been sustained also for 40 days and 40 nights without any bread or any water. And that's where Jesus told the devil that man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God.
You've been listening to Face to Face. Face to Face on this radio station has been provided by Your Neighborhood Church. If you want to help support Face to Face and put this program on other stations just like yours, you can contact us at yourneighborhoodchurch.com or write Your Neighborhood Church, P.O. Box 500, Romeo, Michigan 48065.
There's a place he comes to me. Though I'm blind, he helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see him face to face.
Tune in again tomorrow at this same time as we continue to go through the Bible.